Everything you need to know about newest Tennessee Titan offensive tackle JC Latham. Last night we recorded an instant reaction to the pick. Since then we've slept on it, we've learned a lot more information. We've heard from Brian Callahan, Ran Carthon, and JC Latham himself. So we're going to break down what this new draft prospect means for the Tennessee Titans. This is the Music City Audible. Let's get to it.
Yes, we're going to start him at left tackle. He's played right tackle at Bama. I know he's practiced at left tackle. He's taken reps there, so it's not foreign to him.
He's just a really strong, powerful, big, athletic human. There's not a lot of guys that look like him on earth, so we like that.
Oh, welcome everyone to another episode of the Music City Audible podcast presented by Broadway Sports Media in partnership with 440 Sports. I'm Justin Graver. With me, as always, Justin Melo and Justin. The soundbite we just heard there was Ran Carthon and Brian Callahan. That was the first question at their post-draft press conference after the JC Latham pick was made last night. During the draft, it's like pick 9, 10, 11 are going off during this press conference. And right off the bat, Ran Carthon and Brian Callahan answered the question, will he play left tackle? Will he play right tackle? The question we all had, and we know now he'll play left tackle. And we're going to talk about that first. But before we get into everything, Justin, let's tell everyone about our sponsors, Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville and Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville. Sinkers Beverages has a giant walk-in beer fridge. Both places have huge selections of bourbon, wine, beer, everything you need, all the booze and beverages you could possibly want. Head on over to Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville, Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville. Check the sinkersbeverages.com website and scroll down to join the In Crowd. You can also find that link in the description of this episode. Join the In Crowd. In Crowd members get access to allocated wines and spirits, exclusive events, early access to barrel releases, and more.
I'd go as far as saying is that when I walk in to that walk-in beer fridge at Sinkers Beverages, they call me the Trench King.
Okay, we're going to talk about what the Trench King is here in a bit, but let's start here. We're going to talk about how Ran Carthon and Brian Callahan answered the question by just definitively saying he will be our left tackle. And Callahan couched it by saying, look, if he's uncomfortable there, we'll just pop him back over to right. But I don't think that's going to end up being the case. I think day one, week one comes around, that first Sunday of football, JC Latham's going to be lining up at left tackle.
I agree. Now that we've heard what we've heard, and I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not going to change my sentiment here. I've said it a lot throughout this process. I am surprised that they came out and said, number one, my evaluation was that the player's a right tackle. I said that on this show. I'm not necessarily going to go back on it. Second part of that, I'm surprised that they just flat out came out and said it, right? Like you would think, we'll see where he fits throughout training camp. Mike Vrabel and John Robinson would have been like, we want to get the best 5 on the field. We'll see. We'll get him in. He's an offensive lineman. We'll get him into camp and see where he plays, right? That's what they would have said, and that's fine. But Carthon made a joke about it, right? He said, wow, first question right out the gate. All right, let's get to it. He's a left tackle. So, look, 2022, 2023, you guys probably already know the numbers already. 1,800 snaps, essentially, at right tackle, 0 at left tackle. We know that Alabama cross-trains these guys at practice. So he got reps at left tackle throughout practice, but he never played it. He didn't. Those in-game reps you can't really account for. He's got more reps at guard than he does at left tackle, right? Played about 200-odd snaps as a guard for them in his first year at 2021. He did play tackle in high school, but that's typical, right? When you're as good as he is, like the best player plays left tackle in high school. That's just the way it goes at that level. And a guy that ends up getting picked 7th overall here goes to Bama. He was the best player at his high school, even though he went to a very good one that's had a bunch of NFL players in recent years. So I did think that caught me off guard. I'm not going to push back on it because, look, Bill Callahan knows more about offensive line play than I do. If he came out and told them throughout the pre-draft process, I think you're a left tackle, I think you can play left tackle. And it was interesting that sentiment got pushed throughout the night. Like, I'm sure you've heard the Bill Belichick soundbite by now. I think he was on like the Pat McAfee board or whatever. He gushed for about 2 minutes about the kid. And he came out and said at the end, of course, not knowing yet what the Titans had said.
And he can play left tackle, too. I don't have any doubt about that. I think if they want him to play left tackle, he could play left tackle or he could play right tackle. Honestly, there's some people that think he could move inside if they needed him in there. So this kid's got a lot of he's a good kid. He's a hard worker. He's got a lot of talent.
Huge.
It's interesting because a lot of these NFL guys, I do think a lot of them think the same. So I bet there was a somewhat of a general consensus that he could play the left side if need be. Again, I'm not going to push back on Bill Callahan. My assessment, I'm not going to go back on it. I didn't think that was the case. I'm so glad to hear they think that's the case because, as I told you, I wanted a left tackle. I know they need both, and they talked about needing both, but I wanted a left tackle based on how the production they've got from that spot or the lack thereof over the last 2 seasons. I got some other things I want to touch on regarding Bill Callahan, his history, and what else they said, but I want to turn it back to you.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. Just more on Latham's history at left tackle. Like you mentioned, played left tackle in high school. And not only did he play there, he was the number 1 left tackle recruit in his high school class, chose to go to the number 1 football program in Alabama. And he talked a lot about this. If you haven't watched his press conference, the Zoom presser, they're doing another one on Friday afternoon with him actually in Nashville. But the Zoom press conference he did immediately after being selected with Titans media, you will fall in love with this kid. I'm telling you, if you don't know what he's like as a person, as a personality, just his attitude, the clear work ethic he's demonstrated throughout his life. I mean, this guy loves football and wants to be one of the all-time greats. He talks a lot about the Kobe mentality. He talks about playing at IMG Academy. I'm going to play a clip later of him talking about the IMG Academy stuff, but talks about playing at IMG Academy where NFL players are molded and where they have former NFL players coaching them, and just like the standard that he set for himself and the mindset to want to be great, the books he's read about being great, the documentaries he's watched about Hall of Fame players. It's like this guy lives in this sort of Mamba mentality that you love to see from especially an offensive lineman, but any guy that you pick 7th overall gets to Alabama. And basically, it sounds like from what he said in his presser that it was up to him whether he was going to play left tackle or right tackle. Well, Evan Neal, who was the 6th overall pick by the New York Giants a couple of years ago, was the left tackle at Alabama at the time. And whatever you think of what Evan Neal has become in the NFL, he was a stud in college at Alabama. And so JC Latham said, look, he even says, I didn't want to talk back to or undermine a great player that's been established at this program. So I chose to play an older one. Right. So I didn't want to disrespect what Evan Neal had done at Bama. He was like, I chose to play right tackle where I thought I could get on the field faster. And once I started there, they wanted to keep me there because I was doing great there. So he's played left tackle. And then Brian Callahan also said something in the press conference that said, well, he thinks of himself as a left tackle. They all do, is what he said, which was a funny quote from the press conference. But obviously every tackle, we've seen it with like Orlando Brown Jr. and all these guys that played left tackle and Jonah Williams played right tackle, played guard, whatever, but they all see themselves as left tackles. So I have no concerns about him switching. And I had them before I heard all these people speak, but hearing Bill Callahan's thoughts that he can play left tackle, that Brian Callahan, Rand Carthon see him as left tackle, that JC himself sees himself as a left tackle, like my concerns are fully alleviated.
If you want to be negative, and I'm not saying you want to, but just for the sake of playing devil's advocate, and I'm not saying that this is my opinion, but if you want to ask a question and be a fair show, let's ask a question. When Evan Neal left and they brought in the transfer from Vanderbilt, a guy who wasn't very good and is not very good, in my opinion, that's interesting to me. Why not maybe is that, and it's not a big, maybe it's just like you said, a comfort thing, continuity thing. But I think Evan Neal switched. I think he started out at right because they had a good left and then went to left. So, typically speaking, you would have maybe seen, okay, well, he's our best. And now Evan Neal's gone. Let's kick him to the left now because it's a higher drafted position. He's our best tackle on the roster. That didn't happen. So I actually had a source in Titans media text me that question. Said I would have that question. Why didn't he go over to the left when Evan Neal left? So if you want to have some pushback, question worth asking. I'd actually love to hear that from an honest answer from Nick Saban on that. But no, look, let's get to some of the Bill Callahan stuff if that's okay.
Before you get into his history, let me just read a tweet that Diana Rossini put out shortly after the Titans made this selection. It's very short and it's very to the point. Diana Rossini said, Titans offense.
You interrupted me to read the same thing I was going to read.
I thought you were going to talk about his history with the guys, with the stuff you wrote about in your article. Whatever. Let me do this and then you'll get to your stuff. Diana said, Titans offensive line coach Bill Callahan loves, all caps, loves JC Latham. It's his favorite player in this draft.
Well, they're all going to say that, number one, but I believe it, right? I mean, look. We know Bill Callahan's an offensive line guru, and he loves offensive tackles. why wouldn't he love a 6'6", 345-pound tackle with 11-inch hands and a near 85-inch wingspan and over 35-inch arms? Like, it makes sense that he likes those guys, right? The head coach said, not a lot of people on planet Earth walking around that look like him and move like him. So it makes sense that Bill Callahan would really like. He's got 95th percentile hands. I mean, 11 inches. That's. I told my my partner earlier this morning, because as always, she has to listen to me talk about football. And I said, she goes, a what? 11-inch hands? How? And we're like, we're going to get out the measuring tape and measure her hands. You think they're 4 inches, 5? I don't know. We're going to find out later. But 11-inch hands. She couldn't believe that there was even a human being on planet Earth with 11-inch hands. And he now plays for the Tennessee Titans. And Taylor Lewan's her favorite all-time player. So she was very sad when he left and that they haven't replaced him. So she's excited to have. And she woke up this morning, she said, who was that guy that walked along the stage and lifted the commissioner? I said, that was the new Titans blocker. It was JC Latham, the Trench King.
The Trench King. I want to get into that nickname in a second because I do want to get more to Latham's interview that he gave to the media. But first, let's talk about the other big concern Titans had with this pick, which was sticking and picking at 7 versus trying to get JC Latham in a trade back scenario. So first, I'm going to play a little clip here of Rand Carthon talking about their options when they could have potentially traded back on the clock there.
No, we had a ton of calls, and I'm looking up at the screen now and, seeing Minnesota trade, up a spot. But, we had calls, but as we were sitting there, we were looking at the board. And like I said, we've worked through this. We knew who was going to be available to us when we picked. And so we made the pick, and we just let those teams know that, unless it was an offer that was going to blow us away, it wasn't worth, making a move.
Something else that was said, this was by JC Latham, and I don't know, like, sometimes guys just start talking and they aren't aware of what maybe information they're revealing, and I love that the new regime, as you mentioned before, talking about that he's going to play left tackle and not being all coy and coach speak and whatever. It's so refreshing, but JC Latham himself was asked, did you have any idea that the Titans were interested in you, the Titans might pick you? And he was like,
it was pretty high. My agent was telling me that a lot of their GMs and coaching staff was asking if the Chargers were, interested in me, what they were planning on doing, if teams were planning on trading up from who were past 7, if they were interested in doing things like that. So even when, the draft started, after the Cardinals picked Marvin Harrison, they asked immediately, let us know if the Chargers are talking to him right now. So we had pretty high hopes and high confidence within them that they would make that decision to pull the trigger on me.
So not only were the Titans not going to trade back with Latham on the board, they potentially, I'm going to make a bold prediction here that we'll never know the answer to, but I think if Joe Alt and JC Latham were both on the board at 7, Latham was their guy. Latham was their guy all along. So what I said on the recap show or the instant reaction show last night when I said, like, I don't know if this is a great process addressing a need over a potentially higher ranked player, totally not true. This was their guy, probably the highest ranked player on their board, maybe behind Marvin Harrison Jr., but I think probably the highest ranked player on their board. Bill Callahan loves him. They loved him. They were calling to see if he was going to go 5th overall to the Chargers. That's how, like, before Alt was taken, they were concerned with where is Latham going. I'm telling you, they were not trading back. They did not feel like, and if they had traded back to who knows where they could have gone, but probably 11 is where you're thinking, because I don't think Falcons are trading up. I don't think Bears were definitely not trading up with the limited capital they have. And the Jets, maybe, but probably not trading up. Took a tackle at 10. They took Olu Fashanu at 10. I don't think JC Latham gets to the Titans if they trade back to 11.
So I got a lot of thoughts of what you just said. I'm not prepared to go as far as you went to say they would have taken him ahead of Alt. I don't know. I think Alt was probably the league-wide consensus OT1 and Latham's the league-wide consensus OT2. Not that that's the same for every team. I get it, but I'm just not prepared to go as far as you did. We'll never know. Couple things. Note for our listeners, if you care, you kept saying his agent. Titans got a lot of familiarity with him. That's Drew Rosenhaus is his agent. So in case you didn't know that. The TR Tart stuff from last year was a lot of fun. Not that matters, right? You can't avoid him. He reps too many good players. But it's Drew Rosenhaus. You saw him on the screen there, I think, hug JC Latham when the pick was made. At least I noticed him. The trade back thing, I agree. I'd love to know who and where those offers came from. I talked about league-wide consensus a second ago. If they trade down, it's probably safe to assume they're going down to 10 or further, right? 10 to 12, maybe the Vikings at 11. I agree that they don't get him because I think the Jets take him at 10 if he's there. If I had to guess, they'd probably take him ahead of Olu Fashanu, who, again, I think was probably the league-wide consensus number 3 behind JC Latham. So I do agree if they trade down, they probably do not get him.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think that this was just a guy that they had identified as someone they really liked, that they fully believed in his, not just his on-field play, but the personality and the work ethic and the drive that he has. I mentioned all that stuff already. Again, go listen to his interview if you haven't yet, because I promise you will fall in love with this kid. I want to talk about his nickname, the Trench King. So first, before I get to that, Chris Sims tweeted out right after the pick. He was live tweeting his thoughts on every pick that happened. He said, JC Latham was my favorite O-line prospect, gigantic human being, big butt and thighs, can maul people. Couple that with the Callahan family teaching O-linemen. Hoo boy. And then Robert Griffin III also sent out a tweet about him saying, I love the JC Latham pick for Tennessee's QB1 Will Levis. You gave him D-Hop and Calvin Ridley. Now you give him a guy who had 41 knockdown blocks in 13 games this year. Basically, he was throwing every defender he touched out the club. 41 knockdown blocks. That's essentially a pancake. Now, not every time is it like a JC falls on top of them, full pancake, but getting the guy he was blocking on the ground 41 times last season. That is this is just, we talked about it when we were doing the instant reaction, the mean streak, the finisher that he is, that mean streak that he plays with, just burying guys on the ground. And I tweeted out a 2-minute compilation just of JC Latham pancake blocks on Friday morning. So go check that out on my Twitter if you haven't seen it. But this guy is absolutely just a menace. So the Trench King. Yeah, go ahead.
No. So while we're doing shameless plugs, I also had an article on Broadway this morning that I actually had time. It's rare, but I had time to sit down and write like 1,000-word article. I don't get as much time to do that as much as I'd like nowadays, but I did like 1,000 words on my thoughts, his background, advanced stats, deep dive stuff. I included some of the quotes, embedded tweets. So it's a really good roundup on everything if you want to go ahead and take it. And it's unlocked. It's free to read to everyone. We decided to make that decision. So I want to talk a little bit more about the relationship with Bill Callahan, some of the little things we didn't touch on yet. In the interview, the Zoom presser, Latham mentioned that he spent like 2 hours meeting with Bill Callahan, and Callahan taught him like a bunch of techniques that he had never heard of. It was really cool to hear. I think, Rand Carthon said something the other day where he said, I'm going to show my age. When we were coming up, it was so cool to have some of these older legendary coaches coach us. We knew who they were. You don't get that as much with the younger kids. And that doesn't shock me with social media and just the way kids carry themselves nowadays. But it was really interesting to hear that JC clearly knew who he was, said he's so excited to work with him. They spent 2 hours together on Zoom, and he was already teaching me and coaching me on techniques that I wasn't even familiar with. So I thought that was a really interesting nugget. The other I want to point out, and you said I was going to get into it earlier, was sort of the history Bill Callahan has with tackles switching sides.
Yeah.
The most notable one, the most intriguing one to me, is because there's a lot of comparables here, is when he was in Cleveland and they drafted a right tackle from the Alabama Crimson Tide in Jedrick Wills, and they switched him to the left side in Cleveland. And I would say that's worked with flying colors. Like Jedrick Wills is one hell of an offensive tackle, one of the best young tackles in the league. The other example, of course, we're going way back, is he was with the Dallas Cowboys, Callahan was, when they drafted Tyrone Smith out of USC, who was the right tackle. I'm going to raise my hand and admit I don't even remember he was the right tackle out of USC. It was too long ago. As you know, one of the best left tackles of this last decade in the NFL. He's made 8 Pro Bowls switching to left tackle. So this isn't Bill Callahan's first rodeo when it comes to getting these really good tackle prospects and coaching them up on switching sides.
Exactly. And I think that's another reason I just have the utmost confidence and, again, no concerns about his ability to switch sides. So I want to play a clip here from JC Latham talking about how he gave himself and why he gave himself the nickname, the Trench King, which is this story. I mean, this encapsulates everything I'm talking about. This is so good. And it's a little long, so bear with us here. It's a 1.5 minutes long, but it is well worth the time to listen to. So here it comes.
Yeah, so when I was at IMG, my head coach or my positional coach was George Hageman. He played with the Eagles with Jeremiah Trotter, Junior's dad, with them. Buccaneers, one team that he played with, though, that stood out was the Cowboys with Deion Sanders and Urban and Larry Allen, all them guys when they were winning Super Bowls. And, building that bond every day, going into meetings, you'd hear Coach on the phone with Dion, and he'd always go, "Prime time, what's going on, baby?" And, that just kind of stood out to me, not because, he was able to get in contact with them, even though it's prime time, but the fact that not only did they have a bond, prime time, Dion's standard is prime time. When he's playing, it's prime time, watching the trips to Canton, Ohio, the documentaries about all the players who end up going to the Hall of Fame, they have their name and then trip to Canton, whatever it might be. Dion's was prime time to Canton. So the fact that, that's how marketable and big of a deal his name is, I wanted to have a standard for that, like that for me. Playing O-line, I was new to the position. So I told myself, I said, hey, this is what I want to do. I got to figure out what's my standard and who am I. And that was Trench King. So, with dubbing myself Trench King, I know every time we broke it down and, Trench is on me, Trench is on 3, 1, 2, 3, and you say trenches, it's always a reminder in my head, hey, you're supposed to be the best guy in the trenches. You can't be the fastest receiver or, be a quarterback who can throw it, but control your environment, control the trenches, and dominate the trenches every chance you get. That's the standard of what we play to.
I got chills listening to that. That's insane.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. You love the mentality. You love the work ethic. You love the approach. You love the moldable traits, right? Certainly. And you love, by the way, that he's going to be 21 years old throughout his entire rookie season. That's outstanding. Yep. We talked about, or we didn't talk about, but I talked about on another radio show, Michael Penix Jr. potentially being 26 or 27 by the time he starts for the Atlanta Falcons. And I know it's a little different at quarterback, but that's going to be the case. He turns 24 next week. So he's going to be at least 26 by the time he starts for the Falcons. Titans will have a 21-year-old at left tackle this season.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if you have anything else you want to say about this, or we can transition here and look at day 2 targets for the Titans, guys that now that the first round is fully complete, we can actually talk about who made it and who didn't, like Ricky Pearsall going 31 overall to the Niners. What? That was crazy.
Yeah, that's a team that's getting ready to trade one of those receivers desperately, it seems. But let's talk. I think between the film study we did on Latham a few weeks ago, I tweeted that out, between the instant reaction pod and between this one that's been a bit more measured approach because we know more and we get to really go through it. I think we're good here to move forward to day 2 targets.
Cool. So me personally, I counted a lot of guys that I would be super comfortable with the Titans taking with the 38th pick. And I'm just going to read my list to you here, and you can add a few names if you want to, Justin. But at the wide receiver position, you have 5 guys that I'd be totally comfortable with taking in the second round. Adonai Mitchell, Troy Franklin, Ladd McConkey, Roman Wilson, Jalen Polk. At tackle, there's 4 guys that I'm comfortable with. Kingsley Suamatea, Roger Rosengarten, Patrick Paul, even Blake Fisher in a trade back scenario. At defensive tackle, Jerzon Johnny Newton still on the board, maybe the highest rated player left on the board in terms of consensus rankings, the defensive tackle out of Illinois. And then a bunch of defensive tackles I'd be comfortable with. Rook Orororo, Braden Fisk, Chris Jenkins, Tavondre Sweat, who's been linked to the Titans, had a top 30 with them. Teron Davenport said the Titans really like Tavondre Sweat. He said to watch out for the Tavondre Sweat at pick 38, and he was the guy who said the Titans loved JC Latham. So I'm listening to that one. That one, my ears perk up a little bit. And then at defensive end, I've talked about on this show how much I love Chris Braswell. You talked about how much you love Marshawn Nealand, and I agree. The body type there to replace Danico Autry would be great. Then at linebacker, Junior Colson, Edgerrin Cooper, Peyton Wilson, 3 guys that are probably going to go early to mid second round here as the day gets underway. And then a couple cornerbacks or defensive backs, depending on how you view them, that were potential first round picks in Cooper DeJean and Kool-Aid McKinstry, as well as safety Cole Bishop. And then if you're really interested in just beefing up the offensive line and you're looking at offensive guards, UConn's Christian Haynes is another name to watch here, I think. So that is from pick 33, which is where the draft starts. If all of those guys were the only guys who got drafted at the start of the second round, and obviously they won't be, but if they were, that would take you all the way to pick 53. So with the Titans sitting at 38, I'm extremely comfortable with them moving back anywhere between 38 and 53, and then picking up maybe a third rounder and getting one of the guys off this list.
I hope they move back as well. I'd love to get a third rounder. I'm comfortable moving back, but I'm just going to say it. Your list is way too long. Which is a good thing, because you're gonna take my point is to argue with you, to have some fun here. I wouldn't be comfortable with everyone you listed at 38 there. Like I think Troy, like you mentioned receivers, I think Troy Franklin or Jalen Polk would be a reach at 38.
Let me let me clarify. I wouldn't be comfortable with all of them at 38. I'd be comfortable with all of them at some point in the second round. And so a lot of them would be through a trade back, which is why you're okay with trading back, because you get one of those guys at 45, 48, whatever.
I still think my list would be shorter than yours, to be honest. I think at receiver, like I would limit it to like I don't think I would put Polk. I don't think I'd put Polk or Franklin in there. I think I would have Ladd McConkey and Roman Wilson, and that's probably all I'd have at receiver. At D tackle, I said it to you in a DM. The Tavondre Sweat thing scares me. I don't think I'd be a big fan of that pick at 38. I just you give me all the analytics you want about pass rush win rates. He's 365 pounds. He had 5 career sacks in 5 years. This is never going to be a very good pass rusher in the NFL. I just don't see it. You could throw him up. I'm gonna throw him down. I'm gonna go hooks down on this one.
Kicking you out of this. I'm kicking you out of the Zoom right now. Goodbye. This was fun.
Yeah, those are fighting words. I know. No, I'm just the recent DUI, 365 pounds, 5 career sacks. I don't see a high-level 3-down player. So I wouldn't sign off on that one at 38. I don't. As much as I love the guy, like I had so much fun talking to him. I had a great interview. I loved his personality. I thought he was funny. I thought he was had a good attitude. He was, dominant a little bit. He's got that sort of mentality. He's got the mentality a 365-pound man should have at that size. But my list would be shorter than yours for sure. Like even Cole Bishop, I wouldn't have him on my list. Cooper DeJean's an interesting one because I think he could play some safety, so he's versatile. So you could probably get him on the field with Amani Hooker and L'Jarius Sneed and Cheeto Awuzie and even Roger McCreary. So that one intrigues me, whereas Kool-Aid McKinstry is a full-on corner. It would be a bit of a luxury pick for a team that I don't know has a lot of luxury, but we talked yesterday about how the draft is for 2025 and beyond. It's not just for this year. Kool-Aid McKinstry is definitely, if not the best, I think he's the second best player available going into today. I have him and Johnny Newton on top of my big overall big board. I'd love the Newton pick. I'd ask some questions about the fit because I think he's a 3-tech like Jeffrey Simmons, but he's just so damn good. Figure it out, right? Like we're talking about a guy that's in a different area code from Tavondre Sweat as a pass rusher, right? Like Tavondre Sweat had 5 career sacks. This guy had like 14 and a half in the last 2 years alone, right? He had like 8 this past year. So I love Johnny Newton. I don't know why teams do this every year. Like he's got like a foot injury.
He's got a Liz Frank.
It's probably going to be okay. Like we're not talking about something It's like letting Jeffrey Simmons go 20 overall. And it was a more serious injury with Jeffrey Simmons, an ACL. That was stupid then. This is stupid now. This is a really good football player. Johnny Newton should have gone in the first round.
19th overall for Jeffrey Simmons. But I agree, the Liz Frank thing must be scaring off some teams, and I don't know, he had visits, he did the medical rechecks, maybe something popped up.
A foot injury for a big guy, I get it. Sometimes the bigger you are, the scarier it is sometimes. Yeah. But I'm a big fan of the player. I want to talk a little about Roman Wilson.
Really quick, before you do that, let me also just throw another note in there about the cornerbacks, because you mentioned the future need. And look, I mean, the Titans don't have a lot of depth at that position. You love their top 3 guys, but Awuzie, 29 years old, had an ACL 2 years ago. Like, he's a guy that's had some injury issues in the past. And then L'Jarius Sneed has whatever this knee thing is. We're not really sure. Roger McCreary hasn't played. Has he played a full 16? I guess he did because he led rookies in snaps his first year. But he's also missed some snaps here and there. Like the cornerback is a position where you pull a hammy, you get banged up, you get run over. Sure. Like this is a physical position as much as it's not one of the most.
Their fourth corner is going to play a lot. Right?
Exactly.
This year, now that's Trey Avery or Eric Garror. I get it, but I think my point is, and I love Kool-Aid. Like I said, I get it. My point is obviously you've got like nothing at linebacker. You could use a slot. You could use a detail. Like the corner might be the best position on the entire team, right? With the 3 that they've got. I mean, maybe you'd put an argument for running back because they've got Pollard and Spears, but for the most part, corner, it's one of the top 3 positions on the team, right? And there are other positions that are very bad. You mentioned a couple of the tackles. What's interesting now.
Before you get to tackle, hang on. I want to finish the corner discussion really quickly, just because the only thing I'll say to that is when the Titans drafted Roger McCreary 2 years ago, it was kind of viewed as a little bit of a luxury pick. It was like, whoa, they already have Christian Fulton, Elijah Molden, and Caleb Farley. And we saw how that ended up working out for the team, right? Like, he got on the field as a rookie and played a ton of snaps because you never know.
Snaps, something ridiculous. He played like over 1,000 as a rookie.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So having like, yeah, it's a luxury pick, but at the end of the day, the draft is about getting as many good players as you can. And I don't care if you have a bigger need at linebacker or tackle or slot receiver. If Kool-Aid McKinstry is on the board at 38, he would be an insane value pick and would add a great player to the defense regardless of positions of need.
I'll be blunt with you. I hate the idea, generally speaking, of drafting like a linebacker at 38. Just not my MO. I see it as like the least premium position in the league, I'll be honest. And I'd rather Kool-Aid McKinstry than T'Vondre Sweat. I mocked Kool-Aid at like 18 or 19 overall on Thursday morning. So you get him at 38. I mean, I get it. He's got a Jones fracture in the right foot as well. He ran a 4.47 on the Jones fracture at the Bama Pro Day. Yeah. Like this guy, he's big, he's explosive, he's a press man corner. I think he fits the Denard Wilson scheme and identity of play. But I'm curious to see where they go, because I wrote an article for Music City Miracles last night. 5 positions, 5 different players. I can see them going with I can see them going with a D tackle. I can see them going with a DB. I can see them going with a receiver. I can see them going with an inside linebacker, and I can see them going with an edge defender. Like, I could legitimately see any of those. And I didn't even include, like, doubling down on tackle there. And I grouped corner and DB together because I included Cooper DeJean and with Kool-Aid McKinstry there. So it's like they can go in a number of directions tonight. That's really interesting to me. And I don't think they'll double down on tackle, though. We can talk about that one, but I don't think they will.
Yeah, I agree. So you wanted to talk about tackles? Is that what you said? Well,
doesn't it change things that Latham's a left? Like, are we still looking at Patrick Paul? Like, no chance in hell. You're not going to draft Patrick Paul and ask him to switch to right tackle and ask JC to switch to left tackle. The Kingsley Suamataia one's interesting because he started at right tackle in 2022. He had like 700 snaps there before moving to left tackle this past year. I love Blake Fisher. I look at Blake Fisher and Christian Jones as like pure right tackles. That would be interesting to me because I think they're plug and play at right tackle on this roster. I think they're better than any right tackle option this team has right now. But the point is, Roman Wilson, T'Vondre Sweat, Kool-Aid, like the linebacker, Ed Jared Cooper, Chris Braswell. I don't know if you mentioned Braylon Trice, Marshawn Nealon. The three edges. Like, they can go in so many different directions. That makes this pick really exciting tonight.
Yeah, and I think that the doors are wide open for them to go any of those directions. They don't need to address anything. Like, you'd love them to address linebacker at some point in the next 4 rounds. Yes. It does not have to be in the second round. Same thing with defensive tackle. Same thing with right tackle. Same thing with, wide receiver. You almost feel like maybe they should go with a wide receiver just for the positional board of, like, where you can find other players. Like, there's linebackers later on in the draft. There's D tackles later on in the draft. The wide receivers, like, yeah, there might be a couple later on in the draft, but I feel like that position really dries up, whereas the other guys have, like, pretty good players projected to go 4th, 5th, 6th round. So that's why I would probably lean wide receiver here, especially given the fact that, like, you talk about getting the best players and where the needs are going to be next year, and DeAndre Hopkins' contract expiring, and whether they go with a slot guy to play along all 3 of them, or whether they go with like a Adonai Mitchell or a Troy Franklin or an outside guy to stretch the field and help out DeAndre Hopkins, let him rotate into the slot and then play on the outside when Hopkins is gone. I don't know. We'll see what direction they go. But like you said, they have so many options here that it's kind of exciting to see what's going to happen. But I agree. The ideal move is to trade down because there are more than enough guys available to you there that you can feel comfortable trading down and still getting someone you like.
If you can go down, ideally to me, you don't go down way, but you go down to like 45. I don't know what the trade chart would tell us, but if you can go down to 45, you probably couldn't, but if you go down to 45 and you could get like 70, 75, I guess even in the 80s, like that would be so ideal to me.
Yeah. The Raiders passed on a bunch of needs and took a tight end. They took Brock Bowers at 13th in the first round of the draft. They just drafted Michael Mayer high last year. So they take Brock Bowers 13th this year. They have the 44th pick and the 77th pick. Maybe there's a package there.
Sign me up.
I think the Titans would have to give up more than 38, maybe a future pick next year's 4th rounder, or even this year's 4th or 5th rounder to sort of make that an even trade. But if you can come away with 44 and 77, like I did in my mock draft that we did, that would be a huge win, I think, for the Titans. All right, anything else we should say here before we sign off? And we'll be back Friday night to recap some picks if they make them.
Yeah, can you do it late?
Yeah.
Let's do it late. Let's do it late tonight, like once the dust is settled on everything.
Okay, sounds good to me. We'll be back then. You guys heard it here first. We just planned that right now, live for all of you while you're listening. All right, thanks to everyone for tuning in. Make sure you are subscribed to the Music City Audible channel. Give this video a thumbs up and turn on alerts so you get a notification every time we drop a new video. Thanks to our sponsors, Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville and Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville. Head over to the Sinkers Beverages website or check the link in this podcast description to join the In Crowd. In Crowd members get access to allocated wines and spirits, exclusive events, early access to barrel releases, and more. So make sure you are joining the Sinkers In Crowd. Plus, Sinkers is on Uber Eats. So if you need your booze delivered to your house, you don't have time to run to the store and pick things up, just load up your phone, open the Uber Eats app, search Sinkers Beverages, and you can have everything you need delivered right to your door. Justin, this has been a really fun first round, a little bit of an extra first round recap here. I'm thrilled to see where the Titans go in round 2. Any final parting words as we sign off?
We'll be back later tonight. We'll get this. We'll get the next one up either really late tonight or very early tomorrow morning. So we'll have a recap for you on what the Titans did on Friday evening coming to you shortly.
Exactly. So until then, you all stay safe out there and tighten up.
A Broadway sports media production.